Good morning, or good evening, good afternoon, good night, whatever time it is when you are listening to this. For me, it is morning, and I have a lovely cup of coffee. I have just gotten my youngest kiddo on the bus to head off to school, and now I'm going to attempt to record this for the third time. The first time, I was having an issue with my brain and my mouth connecting. The second time, I was having technical issues. So, third time's the charm. Let's get into it. Today, I want to talk about this myth that people with ADHD can't form habits. We will get this out of the way right now. That's bullshit. The truth is, you already have habits, whether it is doom scrolling Instagram when you should be going to sleep, or, you know, drinking 3 cups of coffee every morning before you remember that life needs water to live. So, you've got habits. They just might not be the ones that you want right now. I'm Kim Spangler. I'm an ADHD coach and fellow serial habit abandoner. And in this episode of ADHD Adultish, we're going to talk about why your ADHD brain rebels against habits and routines, and more importantly, how you can actually make habits work for you instead of feeling like you're constantly fighting yourself. So, why is it so hard to build good habits? Well, we'll start with the basics. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, chemical in the brain that is important for reward and motivation, which I think we can all agree plays a pretty significant role in building habits. So, when we engage in rewarding behaviors, our brains release dopamine, and that reinforces the action and makes it more likely for us to repeat it. So, in people with ADHD, our dopamine reward systems are a little iffy, which I don't think we'll find surprising. So, that can mean low levels of dopamine, which makes it really hard to find the energy or enthusiasm to start or continue habits. Dopamine is also associated with pleasure and satisfaction. So if your brain isn't releasing enough dopamine when you complete a task, you're not getting the same level of enjoyment or satisfaction from it that you might get if you were neurotypical. It also helps us learn from our experiences. So if we don't get enough of a dopamine release, it's harder to connect the positive outcomes with a particular behavior. So, when we think about habits, we tend to imagine that once we do something enough times, it will become second nature to us, like breathing. But for people with ADHD, that is not necessarily the case. So, a neurotypical may, well, let's pick a habit as an example. Drink a glass of water every morning before they get out of bed. Sit it on the nightstand next to them, and wake up, drink it, and then go on about their day. After they drink that water, even if it didn't, taste great because, it's water, they feel good about having done the thing. So there is an internal feeling of reward. They feel good about themselves, So it's easier to repeat the habit because you're feeling good about what you're doing. But for people with ADHD, doing these boring tasks doesn't produce that same feeling of reward. And so doing it over and over again just starts to feel like torture. And so instead of habits becoming automatic, they remain things that you have to think about and force yourself to do every single time. Myself and many of the other people I've talked to with ADHD have spent most of their lives assuming that that's how everyone feels, that they should be embarrassed because they are just lazy and not willing to work hard to build healthy habits. But the truth is that the neurotypical person you're comparing yourself to probably is not having that same experience that you are. Okay, so that's a lot of the bad news. The good news is that none of that, low dopamine and all, does not mean that we can't form habits. And good habits. We can. We can. You just have to approach it a little differently, with a little bit more intention. So, to start with, I want you to ask yourself why. Why is this habit important? What do I get out of it? What am I getting now? What will I get in the future? Why does that thing that I'm going to get matter to me? Find your why and write it down say it out loud, something to make that habit, or something to make that connection sink in to why you're doing this thing. So now you've got your why. The next step is going to be making it fun, because we thrive on interest and novelty, not boring and lameness. So if the habit you're trying to solidify is boring and lame, then you got to find a way to make it fun and interesting. Pair it with things that you already enjoy or that you already do. So, maybe you listen to the best of the 70s classic rock while you're unloading the dishwasher, or dance while you vacuum. I don't know, whatever it is. There's an infinite number of habits that you might be trying to form. So trying to give you examples for all of them is going to be impossible. But the point is, there is something that you can do to make your habit more interesting to you. If your habit is working out or drinking more water, maybe you find a podcast that you really love to listen to and you only listen to it when you're doing your workouts. Maybe you get yourself a really fun, sparkly, happy new water bottle that you just love looking at. Something that's going to increase the enjoyment that you can attain from doing the habit. So, once you figure out how to make it interesting and fun, the next step is going to making sure that you remember to do it. Because people with ADHD struggle with working memory, and that makes it harder to keep habits in mind long enough to create that consistency and feel the long-term benefits. This is where externalizing your executive function can come in very handy. Take the onus off of your brain to remember and put it onto something in the world outside around you. Sticky notes, some sort of visual, a sign that you put on your refrigerator, alarms on your phone, tell your Alexa to give you an alert, something that is going to make it more visible to you, ideally multiple times a day. That may sound simple or even obvious, but it is a critical piece that a lot of people don't think about, because we think, so if something's important to us today, we're going to remember it. Even if we have seen plenty of evidence that that's not going to be the case, we still have this hopeful feeling that we'll remember things because they're important. We're not going to remember things because they're important. Expecting that it's going to happen is setting yourself up for failure. Put the reminders somewhere in the world outside of your head. And it doesn't hurt to have multiple different types of reminders or to change them up regularly so that you don't start ignoring them. So, how do you actually start building a habit that sticks? Here is the secret. Start small. Seriously. Pick something so tiny that you could do it on your worst day. Instead of telling yourself you're going to work out for an hour every day, start with 5 minutes of movement, even if it's just walking around your house for 5 minutes. If you need help with that, I have put together a resource that you can download on my website. It is free. It is the Quick Wins Playbook, an ADHDers guide to boosting confidence and crushing goals. It is a guide that is packed with really simple, actionable steps, some prompts to think your way through how you're going to get those small wins and how you're going to use them to keep building momentum. I will put the link to my website in the show notes, and you can head over there and get a free copy. Because starting small sounds easy, sounds obvious. It's not always. And it can be really easy to feel like that's not going to be enough and get discouraged. But I promise it is the road to lasting habits. Consistency is going to beat perfection every single time. Your goal here isn't to become a fitness guru overnight. It's to get used to showing up for yourself. Showing up consistently, even imperfectly, builds momentum. People with ADHD, our brains often operate in extremes. Either we are all in, so in, or we are totally out. That's not going to be effective when it comes to building habits. It's okay if you don't follow your habit every single day. The goal is to build momentum, not to achieve perfection. And having that mindset from the start can be hugely helpful. Another fun little mindset hack that I find particularly effective is separating, in my mind, the me who is performing whatever task it is right now from the me of tomorrow or next week or next year who will reap the benefits of me doing the damn thing. So, just an example. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You start a load of laundry and then don't ever switch it from the washing machine to the dryer. So then you have to go back and rewash it and rewash it. And then eventually you wake up and you have no clean pants to wear to work. So in one of the million times throughout the day in which you thought to yourself, ooh, I need to go switch the laundry from the washing machine to the dryer, and either don't because you can't work up that boost that you need to be able to force yourself to do the damn thing, or you get distracted. That happens too. But if today me does this thing, right now me, then tomorrow me will be super happy when she wakes up and she has pants that she can wear to work and isn't scrambling going crazy at the last minute. So, why this works, I don't know if there's really an ADHD explanation for that. But many of us are way more inclined to do something that will help others before we will do something that will help ourselves. And by just given that little bit of separation in your brain, it almost feels like you're helping a different person out. Hopefully that makes sense. Or maybe you just think I'm crazy now. Either way, give it a try. Now, next thing. How do we keep this habit train from derailing? And what do we do when it inevitably does? Because no matter what, inevitably life is going to happen. And when life happens, it's easy to fall off the habit wagon, especially, when you've got kids and pets and spouses and whatever obligations you have going on. Stuff always comes up. So, there are some things we can do to try to keep the habit train from derailing and also to help you get back on track when it does. Just a quick note, though, before you jump into trying to recover a habit, I think it's important to stop and think of whether you actually need to do that. Is this habit still serving you? Do you still care about whatever this habit is? Sometimes I think that we hang on to this idea of needing to recover a habit or a routine because we are disappointed in ourselves for not being able to keep it up, when the reality is that that thing is no longer serving us or is no longer a priority, and that's okay. If you have gotten out of a habit and you just genuinely don't have a good why for that habit anymore, then ask yourself, am I doing this because I think I should or because I really want to? That being said, let's move into the tips for actually recovering a habit that you have. So, this is one way that starting with the small wins comes in handy because, for one thing, when you have lost the habit, you know that you have a small, easy, very manageable place to start back again. And it can be discouraging, of course, to realize that you have to start back all over again. But this time, you are starting with proof of the fact that you can build this habit. There is no what if it doesn't work? It can work. Sometimes we get off track because the thing we're doing just got even more boring than it was. Whatever we were doing to keep it interesting isn't working anymore. So, remix. Change up your approach. Find a new way to make it interesting, something that you can do to change up how you were approaching your habit. If it was listening to the podcast and the podcast is not that entertaining to you anymore, find a different podcast, pick some different music, change up the environment. If you always walk in your neighborhood, go walk at the park. If you're tired of lifting weights, try playing pickleball, which I don't really know what that is, but I've heard that it's fun. So change it up, make it fun again. Next step, accountability. For me, accountability is the game changer in a lot of my habits, particularly around healthy eating and exercise and that sort of thing. Shout out to my accountability buddy, Tracy. I love you. You're awesome. So, whether it's a friend, a family member, a coach, having someone check in with you to help you stay on track or for you to check in with provides external structure and gives you a reminder that your brain needs to, keep going with the habit, but also positive reinforcement and building a support system that will help you navigate the challenges of maintaining consistency. If you don't have a support system, now is the time to start building one. And if you don't have anyone that you feel comfortable with asking to be your accountability buddy, maybe you don't like having that level of vulnerability with anyone, email me. I will be your accountability buddy. Kim@levelupmyadhd.com. Tell me what you're going to do and then email me when you've done it. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of ADHD Adultish. Remember that building habits with ADHD may not follow the typical playbook, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. You've got tools to make it work for you. Don't be afraid to mix things up. Start small and lean on your support systems. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with someone who could use a little extra motivation. And don't forget to download my Quick Wins playbook at the link to my website in the show note. You can also sign up for my email list to get even more tips and tricks on dealing with the chaos of adulting with ADHD sent right to your inbox. Join me next week as we dive into more real talk about adulting with ADHD. Until then, keep being awesome and remember, every small step counts.